All right, welcome back to Game 10 of Lucid's 2022 tournament, where we are playing Phlegra. It is turn 75. I actually have a little bit of information about this turn because I checked the general chat. Yep, and not that surprising. Utgard said that they failed their throne rush, which kind of feels like a little bit early, like maybe things went really badly for them against Marignon. But we weren't really doing any patrolling, so it's pretty unlikely that we caused their failure. And of course, yeah, they're breaking their non-aggression pact, right? Like, honestly, like I kind of like it, right? It's like I was correct in my suspicions. Yeah, I always feel bad if it's like I'm assuming that someone's going to break their non-aggression pact and then they don't. I was like, ooh, okay. Like I misread that, but I did not misread this, right? So I guess these are just horrors. Like, who knows where these horrors came from? They could have come from anyone. Which is actually kind of true. Other than Atlantis, pretty much everybody that's left actually can cast horrors, so theoretically this could have been from anybody. But because of the other battles that we saw, we know that this is from Utgard. So not sure the location. That worked out. Yeah, our patrolling forces were beaten. This is just province defense. This is the danger of not patrolling, like with some mages. But, it is what it is. Like, I didn't want to be overly paranoid, right? Because, like, maybe Utgard is a person of their word, and I'm sure they're going to say, like, people, including myself, I think are a lot more permissive. Like, it's pretty late in the game, right? So non-aggression pacts tend to be much more binding earlier in the game, and then when you're going for a throne rush or a win, particularly a throne rush, but even just in the late game in general, people tend to be a lot more forgiving about it. It's kind of like, well, we're down to it, so the non-aggression pacts tend to matter less. I don't know. In this situation, like, right, like Utgard hasn't been fighting anyone. They're a lot more powerful than we are. Like, they don't really need to break their non-aggression pact for this to be a successful attack, in my opinion. But, the player just wants maximum effect. So it is a tournament game. I'm not going to hold it against them, but it does kind of call into question the value of signing a non-aggression pact with them. I probably won't bother signing a non-aggression pact with them again. This is unfortunate. I'm not really sure. I guess we did patrol with some units. I'm not sure how our god got involved in a patrol. We do at least trigger gem usage, so that's good. Yeah, we have some retreats. I'm not really sure what happened here. Yeah, we lose a few units. I'm not really sure why our Gorgon chose to retreat. They did at least retreat into the fortifications. That's kind of good. But yeah, anyway. Like I said, this is what I was expecting. It's always nice to have your expectations fulfilled. So I'm gonna look at this as a positive event. A positive, I guess, can you really even call it a betrayal if that's your expectation? And I will say that, I made no effort to ally myself with Utgard or work with them in any way, but I don't think I was impolite either. Like, they had no reason to be breaking a non-aggression pact. So it looks like we did have a few patrollers. Yeah, I'm really not sure how these mages ended up getting caught, because I'm pretty sure these were just moving into the province, and I guess maybe they got magic phased on. I'm assuming that those horror attacks were on top of the fortifications. And then these were just our mages, like, bumping into their army, right? Because normally friendly movement happens before enemy movement. So if you're moving from friendly province to friendly province, you're going to get there first before your opponents, always in the normal phase. But since we lost control, yeah, Dunster and Divine Sage Temple, yeah. So we lost control of both of these provinces in the magic phase. So our movement was no longer a friendly phase movement, so we ended up bumping with Utgard when they moved their armies in during the normal phase. And we really didn't, right, we were shifting roughly as fast as we could, so there wasn't really any way, unfortunately, for us to avoid this. And this does mean that, like, pretty unlikely that we're going to be able to do a whole lot against this. Unfortunately, now that they're, like, sitting on top of our forts, we can't really hit them with flames from the sky without hitting ourselves. So, again, right, like, breaking the non-aggression pact is, like, good gameplay if you want to be cutthroat and you want to win, which I think this player is both of those things. Don't think they're going to leave this game with a lot of friends, which does matter in the future, right? To a certain extent, diplomacy is choose your own adventure, but certainly can't argue with the results this game. It is looking like they might win, although, like I said, they said in the chat that their gambit failed. Clearly, it didn't fail on our end, so they must have failed on the Marignon side of things. Anyway, we have some unexpected events. Let's see, we lose some tax, huge barbarian horde, which I definitely did not prepare for. Some barbarian, I like that this is the same province, like barbarians incoming, and then there's some more scouts being like, yeah, these defenses look pretty pitiful. We can definitely have our way in a turn or two. So yeah, series of unfortunate events. This is in some ways kind of fortunate, right? Because we're about to lose these provinces. So this is about to be our opponent's problem. Rituals are right for construction rituals, of which there are not a ton. I guess if you're making golems, that's pretty significant, which we actually could make golems if we had the pearls for it, which we do not. And then here are some barbarians. We actually have invested fairly heavily in province defense in this location, happily. So I'm pretty sure this works out for us, particularly, yeah, these guys are javelin throwers. Come on, lucky 7. We'll see, yeah. A lot of barbarians are out. All right, yeah, works out for us. So there you go. And then the entrance to both of our fortifications have been breached. So we'll have to figure out some sort of defense, a few promotions, and I'll catch you guys after the jump. All right, this is the situation and what we're doing about it. Unfortunately, this is primarily going to be a diplomacy discussion turn. Part of that is because we just don't have a lot left going on. We're essentially broke, and we've gathered up our forces more or less in 2 locations to try to resist Utgard. But we've actually been preempted, so, in Utgard's favor, it was indeed a throne rush. They weren't just hopping on top of our 2 thrones in, preparation for trying to win later. It sounds like they jumped on one of Atlantis's 2 thrones. I'm guessing that it's this throne here, since there's no fortification on it, so, they'd actually be able to claim it. Because it sounds like we missed out on a monolith duel, which Atlantis apparently won. So definitely sad to have missed that. I know that, this game is will hopefully be cast by the people who are running the Omniscience Nation. So definitely looking forward to actually, seeing what happened there. But long story short is Utgard's god is now dead. So of course, Utgard reaches out and they're like, they wanted to go back to status quo. Which frankly, I was kind of irked about. Not thrilled about, the whole nap break. And they were not thrilled that I was not thrilled, right? Taking the approach that, well, this is pretty standard, which in a lot of communities, like, it is relatively understood that, naps don't hold a lot of meaning, if you're going for a win. And they were going for a win. At the same time, like, I personally don't love that approach. Again, not saying I would never break a non-aggression pact. But, I do think it kind of undercuts, it's like you don't have to break your non-aggression pacts in order to win. You could, certainly abide by the terms of what you agreed to. Just because, most people, choose to break them, choose to lie, essentially, right at the end of the game because it's convenient, doesn't really change, what you're doing. And I think the reality is like no one likes having that agreement, be broken. And it does undercut the value, even though, sure, there's an understanding like, hey, it's the end of the game. People are going for the win. It's definitely a lot more tolerated. All that aside, like, I really don't understand their offer regular. Like, well, you can just go back to fighting Atlantis. Like, why would we do that? Now, they didn't explicitly, right? They kept it somewhat vague. Didn't explicitly state, right, that they wanted to go back to having a non-aggression pact, but it's kind of, that's more or less what it sounded like to me, and that just makes no sense, right? Like, this is an agreement you just broke. So clearly you feel you're at a point, once they summon their god back, right, because their bless is offline right now, they're essentially asking, like, hey, try to win the game, didn't work out, can I have a few grace turns so that I can try it again? The answer is no. Like, I don't know what kind of response you'd be expecting to that kind of question. But yeah, so we're definitely going to be fighting Utgard now. Atlantis actually reached out as well, and mentioned that essentially they had the same offer from Utgard, and they also didn't really see the point. So, we're basically the agreement we came to with Atlantis, where we're just going to leave it as status quo. We're going to stick with that, and, at least going forward, both of us are going to fight Utgard. We'll see what Utgard did. I didn't explicitly say that, I was going to attack them. I said that I'd have to assess the situation because I had not talked with Atlantis at that point. And the reality of the situation is that if Atlantis wanted to go hard against us, I'd kind of, right, it's like I'd be forced to accept Utgart's conditions because it's like, well, if we want to survive, right, I mean, we could just, honestly, even at that point, I might just cede my land to Atlantis and use the existing forces to go after Utgard. I mean, it really was undecided at that point, so that's what I told him. It's like I have to assess the situation now. But since Atlantis it wants to fight against Utgard, like I'm happy with that arrangement, so we will be attacking Utgard. We don't really have any real attacks this turn. These guys are just scout pings. And then we have one attack, like an air elemental attack somewhere. Yeah, a couple mages cloud trapezing out who probably will be eliminated, right? Because Utgard mentioned, now that they've failed the throne rush, they're like, well, we don't even know if, we want these thrones right now, kind of thing. So I feel like there's actually a pretty good chance that these stacks move off, particularly because their Bless was offline. And, I hadn't really talked with Atlantis when I'd submitted this turn. So I didn't even know that their Bless was offline. So, when I originally scripted this turn, I'd scripted it thinking that like Utgard would be assaulting both of these fortifications. And I didn't really update that scripting. So we probably will lose these cloud trapezing mages. But, I also felt that at the end of the day, right, there's also a chance that Utgard just decides to go for it. Although, now that I'm talking through this, particularly the fact that their Bless is down and they seem to be a fairly cautious player, now that I'm actually talking through it, I think there's a pretty good chance they're going to pull off. But at the time, wasn't thinking about the fact that their Bless was down and was thinking they may still go for it, right? These are thrones that they need. They're in a decent position. They're on top of both of them. They've cracked both of them, especially with their Bless up. I think the armies that they brought, there's a pretty good chance they win both of these fights. So, what we have is we're breaking siege here, and then we're bringing everybody in. We're going to be doing mass flight and some earthquakes, along with, a bunch of other utility-type spells. We're pretty much throwing, almost all the gems that we can at it. I do think, we're fairly outnumbered just in terms of units, but, we're bringing a lot of mages, and we have, some pretty dangerous spellcasters and or super combatants, so I felt like there was a chance that we could win this. And then up here, we did hand out some gems, but, I didn't feel as confident, so we're not going to break out in this location. There's even a few more gems that I would like to hand out, particularly this group now can't get into this fortification. They do have some gems on them, but they don't have nearly enough in the way of chaff. So I think slamming this mage ball into this, would be a way to gem burn, absolutely, and, make assaulting a lot more difficult. But I felt like they're just going to get wiped out so quickly. It would be better to actually move them into a fort, and, maybe they can try to hold this fort or build up some chaff. I do think sitting inside of a fortification that's been cracked, there's a decent chance, we're going to see repeated Winds of Death or something like that. I don't actually know if Utgard has access to the Air Death Crosspath, but I imagine that they probably, if it's not that, then they have something planned, right, where they're going to try to prepare for the assault. And that if we just sit inside, we're just going to get whittled down. So definitely the plan is to break out here as well. We just don't quite have the gems to break out in both locations. Might be as simple as we do have the death gems. But regardless, so we're going to sit in this fort. We'll see if Utgard jumps off. Like I said, I think there's actually a pretty good chance they do. And then we're going to, be attacking this force, trying to cut its retreat route, although there's a good chance that, those mages get wiped out by Utgard moving off. Now, assuming that Utgard does retreat, in a lot of ways, these Doom Stack fights are not how we want to be fighting Utgard. So there's a fair chance we'll break up our forces and, try to spread out as much as possible and then just deal as much raiding damage as possible. We know that Utgard likes to invest a lot in province defense, so we'll definitely be happy to clean that out with some of our heavier raiders, sit on various forts. And, as long as Atlantis can hold their throne situation, we kind of almost don't even need to hold our own thrones. That's definitely a very risky way to play, but, considering I don't feel great about our chances winning in a death ball fight, I do think long term we're going to deal more damage to Utgard if we spread out and raid. But yeah, by doing so, we're essentially giving up the thrones. So yeah, we'll have to see. Maybe Utgard surprises me and chooses to hang out. Maybe we win that battle. Maybe we lose that battle. There's definitely still a lot up in the air. Possibly we just try to hold one throne, right? So like maybe in the north here, especially if they pull off, we can combine this mage ball. Like this is probably our more imposing force, has more summons, just has more units in general, right? So we keep this together and we just hold this throne, right? So Utgard can't easily finish the game. And then down here in the south where, things are kind of a little more questionable, while we actually have more of our tyrants down here. So in a lot of ways, this is an easier force to break up into like some really heavy, raid components. So it's like as long as we stay away from the main army, most of what Utgard, has, at least that we can see, I don't think that these are their only two major forces. So we're definitely going to need a good amount of scouting moving around to make sure we don't bump into something else that can destroy our heavy raiding groups. But basically split a lot of this stuff out so that it's big enough that it can wipe out any, kind of mage ball response from some forts with PD dumps, but small enough that we can cover a lot of different provinces. So yeah, I think that's the most likely thing, assuming everything works out the way I think it will, which is rarely the case. And then let's see, recruitment is real sad. Yeah, we're finishing off our Oppressor Archon. We probably won't be recruiting any more mages. Yeah, we're just recruiting, commanders. This was sort of just a scorched earth like insurance policy. So these guys were going to pull down a bunch of fortifications basically in all these places. I don't normally play that way, but yeah, this what can I say? I'm not Utgard's biggest fan, though then in a lot of ways that probably actually would have just mostly hurt Atlantis. We really didn't have, we had a little money left over, but not enough to really put in any mages. I suppose we could have put it into troops. And it's probably where we'll go in the coming turns, but I mean, we really are not getting a lot of income right now. So in a lot of ways, we kind of need to lose some tyrants. And then, once we lose the tyrants, what do we recruit to replace them with? It's kind of been the question all game long. I don't know. We'll see. I have to think about it. Let's see. Research-wise, I haven't actually checked that in a while. Yeah, Thaumaturgy 8 actually has more relevancy than I realized. We cannot cast it easily, but Beast Mastery, yeah, we really can't cast this easily. But if we wire our Pretender into our Communion, it's fine. It's going to burn out the Communion slaves anyway. The wolves that Utgard's been using have excellent magic resistance for animals. I think it's 13. But overall, that's not that high. So grabbing a bunch of those in a battle could actually make a difference. So we'll see. Not super important, and our research has dropped a lot, but we might actually live long enough to make it to Thaumaturgy 8, at which point, possibly we'll work that in on top of everything else that we're doing. So yeah, I think that more or less covers turn 75.